Our last panel of the day, a one-person panel, but Lou Burch, if anyone can be a complete panel unto himself, it's Lou Burch. Connecticut has been one of the leading states in the country in terms of taking a comprehensive look at plastics. We had most recently the plastic bag ban this past year. A couple of years before that, we had a ban on plastic microbeads. We also had a task force on microfibers, which are plastic and other types of materials. And one of the next areas we need to address is waste. And so Lou Burch is with the Citizens Campaign for the Environment and has been one of the leaders up in Hartford on these issues. So,
thank you, David. Appreciate it very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Again, Lou Rosado Burch, Citizens Campaign for the Environment. I want to thank everyone for coming. Thank the League for organizing this event every year. Really informative, useful opportunity for everyone. Thank you to Lori and Emily for putting me on last, giving me the small task of trying to end this thing with a bang. So I'll do my best. Yes, we have been talking quite a lot about plastic pollution. I mean, there's tremendous buzz around plastic ocean pollution, single-use plastics. We have had a number of really excellent documentaries come out, scientific articles being published, lots of press, and legislative action all over the country and the world, really. Just wanted to kind of start off with a few very brief factoids just to give the scale of this problem a little bit. Experts estimate that out of approximately 8 million tons of plastic waste enter our oceans every year. Only about 9% of those plastics produced in the U.S. are actually recycled. And more than 40% of the plastics in use today are used only once before they are discarded. And so it's safe to say that plastic pollution is a problem that's growing faster than we can actually come up with solutions to solve that problem. And I think the impacts that plastic have on our marine environment are very well documented. They're critical issues to understand, especially when we talk about endangered species. We can see how plastic pollution has been affecting something like 260 different species, including whales and dolphins. But we don't talk enough about what that plastic pollution means to human health. Many of these plastics contain toxics that work their way up the food chain once they get into our fish. And further, the impacts that plastics have on our solid waste and recycling system are not well understood by the public. And so I think that's a critical piece of what we want to talk about today, as David said, was the waste aspect. Many of the plastics that go into the blue bin are actually not recyclable. There's about 7 different categories of plastics. I'm sorry, there's exactly 7. And some of them are not recyclable. Plastics number 3, that's PVC. Number 6, polystyrene. And number 7, which is miscellaneous category. It's a lot of hard plastics. Many of them contain BPA or similar chemicals to BPA, are not easily recycled. And when they are, they're very often what we call downcycled, which means that they're used to make another product that may not actually be recyclable down the road. And so one of those, just to touch on polystyrene, is not recycled by any of our municipalities currently. It takes forever to break down, quite literally. Estimates range anywhere from several hundred years up to several thousand. And it also is toxic. And so polystyrene has been shown to cause cancer in lab animals. It is categorized as a probable human carcinogen by the Department of Health and Human Services. And this, in my mind, makes polystyrene an obvious priority. And so, but once again, the problem is the dirty little secret that we have in Connecticut is that many of the other recyclables that go into that blue bin, or items that you would think are recyclable, are not actually being recycled. And so small items, for example, anything smaller than a quarter, quite literally falls through the cracks. So items such as plastic straws, stirrers, pens, loose bottle caps, toothbrushes. These items are not being recycled, despite the fact that they're made out of durable plastics, some of them. And so even though we have single stream recycling, there are a lot of exceptions to the rules. Things that you might not realize. Many of the paper cups and paper packaging that you use, milk cartons, Ben and Jerry's pints, these type of things are actually coated with a plastic wax. And so you might think it's a paper item, but it's actually much more complicated to recycle these items than you would think. And so there's a lot of what we call wishful recycling happening, where a lot of folks actually just, they look at it, they say this is plastic or paper, they assume it's recyclable, and they throw it in the blue bin. Well, that's actually causing a real problem for our municipal recyclers. And it's important also to, when we talk about these type of waste issues, to understand these challenges in the context of the solid waste and recycling crisis that we are experiencing here and around the country, which in large part has been exacerbated by the Chinese National Green Sword policy. So the Chinese have adopted a policy aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions and cleaning up their waste stream, improving efficiency, which is what we all should be doing. But they're no longer accepting recyclable materials from overseas that are more than 0.5% contaminated. And so, and as I'm looking at some of the recycling advocates in the room, people are nodding their head. Most professionals generally understand that standard to be unachievable. And so what's happening is now we have recycling districts across the state where paper, recyclable paper, plastics, aluminum, these type of commodities are now just piling up. And whereas municipalities used to be able to sell them to China at a profit, you now have municipalities looking at recycling costs that fluctuate dramatically from month to month. The city of Middletown, for example, which is a small city, comparatively speaking, when you look at their recycling program, they went from making money on recyclables a few years ago to now they're paying around $50,000 a year to process their recyclables. And these are communities, I see Quentin Phipps here. Thank you for joining us, by the way, Representative Phipps. So these are challenges that are affecting our communities, they're affecting the efficiency of our recycling system, and they're costing taxpayers money that these towns weren't previously budgeted to spend. And it doesn't just affect municipalities because private haulers' costs have gone up as well in recent years. And so states like Connecticut now need to implement common sense solutions, waste management and recycling alike, to cut down on the amount of waste that we're producing, reuse what you can, and recycle the rest. And so we actually have advocates all over the Northeast and around the country advocating for what we call zero waste policies, which are designed to do exactly that, where you cut down on the stuff that you can't recycle. Get rid of the plastic wrap, get rid of the excess packaging, reuse what you can, refillable containers, that kind of thing, recycle the rest. And so just to give folks a sense, very briefly, the results of the last waste characterization study that DEEP did was in 2015. It was a little while ago, so this may have changed. But actually, the biggest sector of our waste stream is paper products. It's about 23%. Paper, corrugated cardboard. Food waste is about 22%. Construction and demolition debris is about 12%. Plastics, 12%. Organics, 11%. And then other, about 12.5%. And so these stats tell us that a significant portion of our waste stream could be reused or could be repurposed to the highest and best available use, but it's currently not. And so equally important to tackling plastic waste, we need to start dealing with paper and cardboard. Pulp is a huge challenge for our local recyclers. And we need to start doing something about consumer packaging, which makes up a tremendous section of that paper and plastic waste. We need to expand on food waste diversion programs and curbside composting for our communities to deal with all of that food waste that is going in the garbage every single year. So once again, the theme of reducing waste across the board and trying to start a conversation about how to do that in a comprehensive way. So that's my rant on recycling. I was invited here to talk a little bit about how Connecticut's leading the country specifically on plastic pollution, and I agree that we have done that. Starting, as my colleague David said, with a ban on plastic microbeads. We were one of the first to take on this really massive ocean pollution challenge in 2015 with a ban on personal care products containing plastic microbeads. I'm not sure if James Albus is still in the room, but former Representative James Albus was the House Chair of the Environment Committee when we tackled this issue. So just a quick shout out to him. But in 2018, Connecticut, again, established a task force on microfiber pollution to get at that plastic pollution problem in our oceans. That was designed to identify major sources of microfiber in our environment, educate the public on the problem, and to work with industry on developing a plan to reduce microfiber pollution. The final report is still in development, we understand. We're eagerly waiting to see what that looks like, and I, along with Bill Lucy, the soundkeeper, who's also a member of the Microfiber Working Group, have been advocating for that group to stay together and to be able to continue working on not just microfibers, but on other plastic pollution issues as well, moving into the future. I think many folks in this room know Connecticut established herself as a leader on combating pollution from single-use plastic bags, starting with the town of Westport in 2007. Representative Steinberg is here. That was the first local ban on plastic bags on the East Coast. That was right here in Connecticut. And that local effort really picked up massive grassroots support over the last 2 years, from 2018 to 2019, with over a dozen Connecticut municipalities passing local ordinances to ban plastic checkout bags in their communities, with about a dozen of them adopting a fee on paper, which is also a really important part. Since the beginning of the whole plastic bag conversation, we have advocated for a hybrid ban. It's not enough to simply replace plastic bags with paper bags. We've already talked about why paper is a problem. What we want to do is to promote a more sustainable consumer behavior and encourage people to bring their own bags. The best way to do that is with a ban on plastic and a fee on paper. Many of the towns have started moving in this direction, and there's about another dozen or so towns that are at some stage of considering their own local bans. In 2019, that momentum that we saw resulted in the Connecticut General Assembly passing a budget measure that established a 10-cent charge and a 2-year phase-out on plastic checkout bags. And that just happened. A big, thank you to all of the grassroots groups that were involved in that, the BYO Connecticut Network, the local BYO groups, Live Green Connecticut, as well as the League of Conservation Voters, Environment and Human Health, and some of the other statewide groups. And I would be remiss if I didn't recognize the chairs of Environment, Representative D'Amico and Senator Cohen, that really put their neck on the line to get this legislation passed. So thank you so much for your advocacy. Just so, 3 minutes. Okay, thank you. So what's next? There's a number of different really common sense plastic reduction strategies that I think are prime. Working on reducing polystyrene waste. Okay, last year the House and the Senate each passed their own bills, one on phasing out polystyrene food containers, the other on phasing out polystyrene lunch trays in schools. Both houses passed their own bills, neither passed both houses because the time ran out. But that to me tells me that this is an issue that is mature and ripe for the picking. Plastic straws and stirrers. Ocean Conservancy says that plastic straw is one of the most common plastic ocean pollution items that they collect during beach cleanups. And we know that a single reusable straw can eliminate the need for literally hundreds of plastic straws. We support, at a minimum, passing a soft ban, which is to say that food service establishments will not automatically put out or offer a plastic straw unless specifically requested. And ideally, that legislation would also enable municipalities to pass their own laws, assuming that they are at least as restrictive at what exists at the state level. Helium balloons was another big issue last year, spearheaded by Representative Mashinsky. Remember that what goes up must come down. This is about protecting, once again, the Long Island Sound and our marine environment. So passing a prohibition on intentionally releasing any helium balloons in Connecticut. But the top priority for CCE and a number of our allies this year is going to be working to expand and modernize Connecticut's bottle bill. Refundable container deposit programs are effective. We know that states that have them recycle at a higher level than states that do not. Unfortunately, our bottle bill has not been updated over the years to keep up with changing market trends and inflation. And so Connecticut effectively has the lowest performing bottle bill program in the 50 states. And so an updated container deposit law could increase recycling by an additional 200 million containers every year, and that's just for the non-carbonated beverages. We also support adding a deposit to glass wine and liquor bottles. DEP estimates that that's roughly about 60% of the glass going into the blue bin. But unfortunately, and I have to emphasize this point, the big beverage companies and many of the local distributors that produce these beverages have not been good actors on this issue. And they have been unwilling to come to the table to negotiate on this. In fact, over the years, they have worked together. They have coordinated very closely to thwart our efforts to expand the bottle bill and to keep the program out of date. Meanwhile, many of these companies, Coca-Cola and some of the others included, are supporting bottle bill programs overseas, both in establishing them and expanding on existing programs. They're also announcing initiatives to have their bottles contain more and more recycled plastic. Coca-Cola has the Every Bottle Back campaign. Many of them are saying we're going to have 100% post-consumer recycled content by this date certain. That's not going to happen unless you have an efficient way to collect every bottle that you produce. And so far, they have been speaking out of both sides of their mouth in terms of trying to advance these lofty recycling goals, but at the same time, working to keep down a program here in Connecticut that could really help them achieve those goals. And so I'll just start to wrap up by saying we support expansion and we need your help. We're going to be working this year to expand to all the non-carbonated beverages, anything that's not currently covered by the law, and to increase that deposit from 5 cents to 10 cents so that we have a meaningful financial incentive to recycle. So please, reach out to your legislators. Anyone who's concerned about recycling, plastic pollution in this room, we need you to contact your representatives and your state senators and urge them to support expansion this year. Send them tweets with the hashtag #ModernizedCT Bottle Bill. And we also have a Facebook page, Connecticut Bottle Bill Works, where I'm going to be sending out a lot of updates and action alerts and that kind of thing. I encourage you, please come find me after this presentation because I also have a sign-on letter and a number of other resources that we're going to be using. But what we need is we need a real grassroots movement, akin to what we saw this year on plastic bags. Remember, the way that we're able to win over big business is with local action, grassroots organizing. Together, we can make a difference on these issues, and we can certainly make a difference on the bottle bill this year. So, thank you. So we're running a little bit behind. If folks have questions, they can feel free to come see me afterwards, but for now I'm going to pass it back to my friend David to close up. Thank you.